Hello and welcome to the Christ Baptist Church devotional. We're almost done with the book of Genesis. We're in Genesis chapter 49 and we're on the last day of Jacob's life where he is just gathering up everything, every bit of strength that he has, and he's going to die. But before that, he wants to give a blessing to each of his 12 sons that he actually bore with his wives and his concubines that he had. And so he's going to gather them together. We've seen how in the last devotional, Genesis chapter 48, how he blessed Ephraim and Manasseh and adopted them in as grandsons. And he gave them a blessing just before he was going to die. He was sick. We realize that from Genesis chapter 48, verse 1. And so here he is on this last day. He's going to say something specific for each of his sons. So I guess maybe the question would be is if your father was going to have his last day and you meet with him, what would you want him to say about you? What would you want him to remember you by? Well, this is what we get to see right here in Genesis chapter 49. Let's take a look here as we kind of follow through what's going on and what Jacob is saying. Then Jacob summoned his sons and said, "Assemble yourselves, that I may tell you what will befall you in the days to come. Gather together and hear, O sons of Jacob, and listen to Israel your father." So here we have somewhat of a prophecy by Jacob, who's talking to his sons about what's going to happen to them. Starts with Reuben. But before he's not going to do it in birth order. He actually does it in what's called a chiasm, which is kind of a fancy Hebrew academic term, which is like a climbing up to a mountain, get to the top, and climbing back down to the mountain, which makes it easier to remember both sides. That's how Hebrew poetry would actually work. Means you climb to the center and you then go back down to the sides. And it starts with 6 children of Leah, and then there's a child of Bilhah, who is Rachel's maid, 2 children of Zilpah, which is Leah's maid, back down now to Bilhah, which is Rachel's maid, and then ending with Rachel. So Rachel is on the bottom of the other side of the mountain compared to Leah. That's how Moses decided to write this as he records these words. So it starts with Reuben. Verse 3, "Reuben, you're my firstborn, my might and the dignity of my strength, preeminent in dignity and preeminent in power, uncontrolled as water, you shall not have preeminence. But because you went up to your father's bed, then you defiled it, he went up to my couch." Well, this is what we saw in Genesis chapter 35, verse 22, that Reuben actually went up and had relations with his father's concubine, and in essence it would be family incest. He was just disrespecting his father, and because of that he lost his birthright. We saw that in Genesis chapter 48. So what's Reuben known for? Losing his birthright, because he disrespected his father. Uncontrolled as water, you shall not have preeminence. That's what he's known for. We also see that in 1 Chronicles 5, verse 1. The next 2 sons of Leah, Simeon and Levi, are brothers, verse 5 tells us. "Their swords are implements of violence. Let my soul not enter into their counsel. Let not my glory be united with their assembly. Because in their anger they slew men, and in their self-will they lamed oxen. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will disperse them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel." Genesis chapter 34, verses 25 to 30 kind of indicate this account here. Simeon and Levi are 2 brothers. They were born of Leah. And when they heard that their sister Dinah got raped by the prince, the son of the king, at Shechem, a place called Shechem, that they made a plot, and they told the people at Shechem, they said, "If you guys get circumcised like we are, then we can trade with you. We can be all kinds of business partners." So they convinced the people at Shechem to men get circumcised, which they did. And then on the first or second day, they went in when they were in great pain. They strapped on their swords and they killed everybody. They completely killed everybody, wiped everybody out. And because of that, it made Jacob have to pick up and move. And he had to fight those people, which is why he's saying, "Their swords are implements of violence. In their anger, they slew men. Their self-will, they lamed oxen." I mean, they killed everything. They killed the oxen. They killed a lot. So because of that, I'll disperse them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. So the Levites never got any land from God, because God took them from Israel and gave them back to the people as priests. So the Levites never got any land inheritance. And the people from Simeon were so small that they were absorbed into Judah. So they couldn't hold their territory. Once they got it, they couldn't hold it, and they were small, they were absorbed into Judah. So again, it's just what Jacob had prophesied. Now it's interesting, the fourth here, Judah, he says, your brother shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's son shall bow down to you. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He couches, he lies down as a lion, and as a lion, who dares rouse him up? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until Shiloh comes, and to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. He ties his foal to the vine, and his donkey's colt to the choice vine. He washes his garments in wine, and his robes in the blood of grapes. His eyes are dull from wine, and his teeth white from milk. So here we get a total of 5 verses for Judah, of which Judah and Joseph are going to get the lion's share, literally, no pun intended, the lion's share of the verses individually as compared to the others. Reuben, Simeon, and Levi got more than just a verse. They got 2 or 3 verses each, but it was really negative. But here Judah gets something really positive. Your brother shall praise you. Matter of fact, your father's sons, the rest of Israel, will bow down to you. No doubt this is messianic here. This is talking about David, who's going to come from Judah, but also the greater David, the Lord Jesus Christ. The Lion of Judah. This is where we can get the Lion of Judah. Verse 9. Judah's a lion's whelp. From the prey you've gone up. He couches, he lies down as a lion, and as a lion, who dares rouse him up? Is preparing for really the situation in Judah that Jacob is really praising. Now, again, we want to think, why is Jacob praising Judah here? Well, God is telling him this is where the Messiah is going to come out of. And many of you are trying to find the right pattern or rhythm of Jacob's families, and who comes out of Rachel, and who comes out of Leah, and who comes out of the others. You're going to be disappointed, because the Messiah does not come out of Rachel, the desired wife. The Messiah comes out of Leah, the unloved wife. So that's ultimately in the line of Christ. And that's where it's going to be in coming here. And so with this, we can say also, why is Judah praised here in Jacob's eyes? So in Jacob's eyes, as he's saying, Judah, we can see here, really was standing up for his brother Joseph and Benjamin. And he told Jacob before, he said, you hold me responsible for it totally. And basically he was saying, I want you to stand in, so it's his life or mine. And so we see that in Genesis chapter 44, when Judah is telling his father about this. He's telling his father about what's happening. He says, your servant, verse 32, your servant became surety for the lad to my father, saying, if I do not bring him back to you, then let me bear the blame for my father forever. So he's saying, I became surety, my life for his. Now therefore, please let your servant remain instead of the lad, a slave to my lord. Let the lad go up with his brothers. So he basically told Joseph, his brother, but he didn't know that. He thought he was in charge of Egypt. He said, please let your servant remain instead of the lad, instead of Benjamin, who's the favored brother, by the way. Everybody knew that he was favored by Jacob. But Judah said, let me stand in the place of the one who the brothers really don't like, and I'll be there to ensure that he comes back. My life for his. No doubt Jacob understood this, and so he's praising him above. The whole idea of substitutionary atonement is right there. Jacob sees it, and prophetically God gives him these words, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until Shiloh comes, and to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. Now, Now we say, what in the world is Shiloh? Well, Shiloh is a place where in the early stages of David's working with Saul and fighting in the kingdom there, Shiloh is a place where they worshipped. But that's not what this means. Shiloh is somebody who has to come. And the best that I can figure is Shiloh would be more of a participial form of the verb shalach, which means to be sent, the sent one, until the sent one comes. And to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. And so much so that when he ties his donkey's colt, his foal to the vine, and his donkey's colt to the choice vine, and he washes his garments in wine, this speaks of there's so much wine, there's so many grapes, it's so prosperous. You won't even think to get a rope to tie your donkey up. You'll just let him, here, take one of these vineyard vines and tie up the donkey with that. That way the donkey has something to eat. Because you don't care about the vineyard, it's got so many grapes. That would be a millennial kingdom perspective there. Jacob sees this. But then he goes to the next two sons of Leah. Zebulun will dwell at the seashore, and he shall be a haven for ships, and his flank shall be towards Sidon, way up north. There's not much else about Zebulun other than we know in Matthew chapter 4 and in Isaiah chapter 9 verse 1. In the land of Zebulun and Naphtali, a light has come. Talking about the ministry of Christ. Up there near the seashore, but not quite on the seashore, but near the seashore right there, they're so strong they were able to get into ships. 14, Issachar is a strong donkey lying down between the sheepfolds. When he saw that a resting place was good and the land was pleasant, he bowed his shoulder to bear burdens and became a slave at forced labor. So Issachar, again a tribe of Leah, people who are a strong donkey, used to bearing burdens, understand what it is. They did not drive out the Canaanites. And so eventually they got taken over themselves, they'll bear burdens, but they'll do it diligently. These are men who came to support David. When David was gathering all his mighty men, his big army, after Jonathan had died, here comes the army of God coming into David. The men of Issachar came, and it says distinctively, men who understood the times. Men who understood what the time was, the political climate, what to do. That's Issachar. And then we get to Bilhah's child Dan, verse 16. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent in the way, a horned snake in the path that bites the horse's heels, so that his rider falls backward. For your salvation I wait, O Lord. What do we know about Dan? Dan again was up north, and Dan is noted for great success. They really had a great military victory, routing the people under Joshua when they came in and they took their part of the land. But then a great failure in that immediately they set up idolatry. They're figured in the book of Judges when they basically captured a guy who was a priest and said, you be our priest and you now are just going to serve us. So Dan is back and forth. There'll be a serpent in the way. They bite at horses' heels and basically causing trouble, victory, and then defeat. And then Zilpah's child Gad. As for Gad, raiders shall raid him, but he will raid at their heels. They were warriors, and Gad, very small tribe there as well. They were on the other side of the Jordan, along with the half-tribe of Manasseh. So Gad is just saying that you're going to be fighting, and they did. When they're on the other side of the Jordan, they had the Moabites to the south, they had the Ammonites to the east, they had the Syrians, the people up there on the northeast who came. As for Asher, verse 20, this is again Zilpah, Leah's maid, his food shall be rich, and he will yield royal dainties. So, yes, use the royalty, but they're having to serve the other kings who came in and took them over. And so there's certainly some prosperity in terms of their food. Now back down to Bilhah's child, Naphtali, is a doe let loose. He gives beautiful words. And so Bilhah is noted there, but only in terms of saying, being able to say things but not have much action. And then we get all the words here for Joseph, verses 22 to 26. Joseph is a fruitful bow by a spring. Its branches run over a wall. The archers bitterly attacked him, shot at him and harassed him, but his bow remained firm and his arms were agile. From the hands of the mighty one of Jacob, from there is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. From the God of your father who helps you, and by the Almighty who blesses you with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lies beneath, blessings of the breast and of the womb, the blessings of your father have surpassed the blessings of my ancestors. Up to the utmost bound of the everlasting hills, may they be on the head of Joseph, and on the crown of the head of the one distinguished among his brothers. So he's distinguished among his brothers, Joseph is, because of what he did, and how he saved Israel and his family. You could break this up as the first verse there is about his prosperity. A fruitful bough by a spring, branches running over a wall, that's prosperity. Verses 23 and 24, that's protection. He's going to be protected. The archers bitterly attacked him, shot at him and harassed him, but his bow remained firm and his arms were agile. He sort of needed protection. He was protected by God, but he was in prison for 13 years, raised up to be the second in charge of Egypt. This is Joseph's life. He ended up being prosperous, but he started out prosperous, being son of Israel. But his brothers attacked him. He was protected. And then the blessings in 25 and 26. From the God of your father who helps you, and by the Almighty who blesses you, with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lies beneath, blessings of the breast and of the womb. So, blessings from the God of your father who helps you. So he recognizes this is the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. And you'll get all of his blessings that surpass the blessings of my ancestors. That's the kind of blessing he's talking about. Your father have surpassed the blessings of my ancestors up to the utmost bound of the everlasting hills. And they'll be on the head of Joseph. So, massive blessings on Joseph as his son. Now, Ephraim and Manasseh are not in here because he's talking specifically about his 12 sons. And Joseph went on for over 50 years to be reigning in Egypt. Lastly, verse 27, Benjamin, Rachel's other child. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he devours the prey, and in the evening he divides the spoil. So it's like a ravenous wolf that is continually hunting, morning and evening. And I guess we could take a look at how Benjamin fared as the kingdom went on. That's where the tribe of Saul came out of. They were mighty warriors who fought. The passage tells about how there were so many left-handed men who could sling a stone and not miss a hair. So the Benjamites were fierce warriors who could really do some serious damage. Well, these are the blessings to the 12 sons, and this is the point I'd like to make here, verse 28. And then we'll stop at verse 28, and we'll pick up at verse 29 when we do the last devotion, which is these last verses of 49 and then chapter 50. But verse 28 tells us, all these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is what their father said to them when he blessed them. He blessed them, every one with the blessing appropriate to him. And that's what I want you to see, with the blessing appropriate to him. God gave blessings to each of the sons appropriate to them. And that's the way it is with God. As we raise up, we hear and we read about the judgment seat of Christ, where everything you've done gets put on the judgment seat of Christ, and it's either burned up or it's retained as a reward. And there are rewards given appropriate to every child of God. And here there's a blessing appropriate to everyone with them. They're still the children of Jacob, still the children of Israel, still going to be in the tribe, still get the land, still get all the major blessings, but they each have something very specific based on how they lived out their life and who they were. Many we don't know much about, but the three that we do, Judah and Joseph, and we did have Reuben and Simeon and Levi, we can see very specifically how God, through Jacob their father, has blessed them appropriate to them. They didn't suffer. They were all given every opportunity. They all had land. They all had the same God. But based on their personalities, Jacob was telling them where they're headed. They could have changed that and made the prophecy come fulfilled in some other way. But this is how it worked out. And the big one that you see is Judah, which because he gave substitutionary atonement, there as he's talking to Joseph, which no doubt Jacob heard about it. This is what he's saying. He is, father's son shall bow down to you. Notice they're not bowing down to Joseph, which was in the dream. That already happened in Egypt. Something separate. This is now something much bigger, because the Messiah is going to come. The sent one, Shiloh, is going to come. And the scepter shall not depart from Judah. The king will always be on the throne of Judah until Shiloh comes. Then he's going to take it. There'll be no more kings. And it's going to be great prosperity where you tie up your donkey to a grapevine. That's what the last words are here of Jacob to his sons. So look at this, take it to heart in terms of what would your father say to you, remembering you, what last thing and only thing is he going to remember as he goes on his final breath. That's what we see here in this most of Genesis 49. We'll just pick up here in Genesis 49 verse 29, which is really basically Jacob's death, and then get into chapter 50, and we'll finish the book of Genesis in our devotionals. So we thank you for being here and look forward to seeing you in Genesis chapter 50.